Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good morning. My name is Arvind Krishendahal, and it's a pleasure for me to be here once again with my Metamorphosis colleagues. I am the Manager of Settlement Services at Indus Community Services and the Chair of the Metamorphosis Network Research Committee. We do have a PowerPoint presentation up that's excellent in front of you, and Angela shared with you a few highlights from our recent report, and now I would like to take you through some of the specific details and findings. The report, as Angela mentioned, was conducted by Blueprint ADE, a highly respected research firm that focuses on complex public policy research. The report draws primarily on government documents to track funding allocations to social service providers, including municipal financial information returns, T3010 CRA charitable tax returns, consolidated LIN annual reports, and school board financial reports, as well as Mapbox geocoding to disaggregate the data by municipality. The data was analyzed by the team at Blueprint and by researcher Thomas McManus, and we want to share with you some of the key findings from the report. In the report, there are several approaches used to assess the issue of provincial underfunding in Peel. The first was to look at how much less per capita municipalities in Peel region get less than their counterparts annually. To ensure a fair comparison, funding to all municipalities in Peel, including the region, but also the local municipalities, Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, were included, and compared to consolidated funding in other jurisdictions. The comparison also excluded small rural municipalities with populations under 50,000. The overall per capita average funding was calculated for municipalities across Ontario and compared with the annual per capita funding for all municipalities in Peel. We looked separately at municipal core and social services, nonprofit community services, and OHT, formerly LIN-funded community health supports, in addition to large school boards to gain an overall picture of the funding for community services in municipalities in the region. The results were alarming. The slide on the screen now shows a table from the report that shows provincial underfunding of municipal social services in the municipalities in Peel. This includes the full scope of municipally delivered community programs, from senior supports to libraries to childcare to social housing across all levels. As you can clearly see, provincial funding for municipal services for people living in the region falls consistently below the average for the rest of the province's and municipalities. On average, since 2015, the inflation-adjusted funding across Ontario is $576 per capita, while Peel gets only $431 per capita, a staggering gap of $145 per person. When multiplied by our population, that's a gap of approximately over 200 million every year. Blueprint applied a similar analysis to municipal core services, nonprofit community services, local schools, and community health services, like mental health programs and community supports. This analysis does not include an assessment of institutional health services, such as hospitals, as some hospitals serve geographically wider areas, and it's therefore harder to clearly compare it on a geographical basis. On the next slide, you can see the various categories of provincial underfunding that Angela kindly summarized. You can see that people who live in Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon get far less funding than the provincial average in every category. In addition to the $145 per capita shortfall for municipal social services, we all make do with a shortfall of $59 per capita in municipal core services. Our nonprofit service providers get $250 less in provincial funding per capita each year than nonprofits in the average. Ontario community. Community-based health services like mental health and community supports get $67 less per capita from the province than the average. And our major school boards combined get more than less than $50 per capita than the Ontario average. When you add all those up, Peel residents are making do with $578 per person less in provincial funding than the average Ontarian each year. Multiply that by the populations of Peel, and we are struggling with an approximate $868 million gap in provincial funding every year. These are disheartening numbers, and it's easy to try to come up with a reason why they should be ignored. Maybe Peel shouldn't be compared to those averages. Maybe economies of scale would enable Peel to get by one less. I'm wondering if it would be possible for me to utilize the next 5 minutes. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Just to be sure, we asked Blueprint to compare Peel to the large municipalities in Ontario. Just then, ones over 500,000, the Big Seven: Toronto, Ottawa, York, Hamilton, Waterloo, Durham, and Halton. The results were just as disheartening. As you can see from the graphs on the screen, Peel finished dead last in comparison to the other large municipalities when it comes to per capita provincial support for social services in every area but education, where Peel finished just below the average. Finally, as Angela mentioned, Blueprint assessed the impact on municipal taxpayers. What we found, not surprisingly, was that municipalities in this region could not sustain the services the community needs without picking up some of the slack. We see in the slide now on the screen that municipal expenditures on social services, adjusted for inflation, have risen steadily in the face of provincial underfunding. The municipalities in this region spent $138 more per capita on those services in 2002 than they did in 2015, an increase of about 23%. That is not to say that taxes rose by that amount. What it does show is that the allocation of funding internally in the municipalities here has had the shift to prop up Queen's Park's shortfalls. That was certainly the right decision. Not funding those programs would have resulted in far higher costs in shelters and EMS and policing. They were smart investments under the circumstances, but they would have not have been necessary if the province were funding at the level they fund everyone else. Thanks for your patience as we go through the details of this report. But we wanted you, as policymakers, to be clear about the details of the problem we have been able to quantify here. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, did you have anything? Any other final comment? You've got a minute or two more.
I'm happy to just make a couple of very quick comments. And one is that one of the things that people will wonder is why? Why does Peel get so much less? And there appear to be a wide number of reasons. It's difficult to entirely quantify the logic and the sequence that led us there. But one of the things we certainly know is that Peel has been growing. It's been growing very quickly. It's one of the virtues of Peel. Peel is growing wonderfully well. It's a huge success story. Peel is growing, but funding isn't. Funding has not kept pace. Queen's Park has not kept up with the way that Peel is changing. The demands in Peel not only are numerical, but the complexity of Peel as a community has also grown. That we didn't quantify at all. So Peel is growing in every imaginable way, and sadly funding is not growing at the same pace.
If I could briefly add, if that's okay. You know, for years we've been hearing the qualitative impact, especially from the nonprofit sector, about how this disparity in funding has affected our core services. But this report is the first time that we're seeing the large qualitative impact. And it just speaks volumes. And I think this is the first time we're actually seeing this number, and it's frankly disheartening. And I think now's the time for us to adequately address this in a productive way.
Here, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd to even add to that.
Please, closing comment to you before we go to questions, please.
Based on what even Gwen was speaking about, that shortfall is a reduction in services and programs that we can put to the community that can reduce some of these crises we're seeing in Peel region today. We need that funding to be put into community, as you said. You know, $1 up front can save $6 later. Right. We need that funding to come in that we can put into programs as well as everything else. So it is necessary, and it's a situation that needs to be looked at immediately and corrected. Start correcting. We understand it can't be erased overnight, but you need to have a plan in place to really start moving right away. Thank you.
Excellent presentation. Excellent report. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Santos.
Thank you so much, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the delegates for sharing such important information, very valuable information. And I will be sharing this presentation and the information that you shared to my constituents in wards 1 and 5. A few questions for you and this is so important because to emphasize Chair Nando's comment that the provincial and federal government, they hold 90% of the taxes and revenue collected in order to deliver services. We at the region, I'm in wards 1 and 5, folks already know that I've been talking about the homelessness issue and the encampments along the Etobicoke Creek Trail. People are living in a flood zone. There are significant public safety risks associated with it. But this is not the region's fault. This is not the city's fault. It's not the region's fault. It's nobody's fault. We're trying to find a solution. To the chair, or through the chair, and to the delegates, the homeless encampment issue that we're trying to navigate now and scramble to deal with now is a direct negative consequence of chronically underfunding at the region of Peel with respect to social services like mental health and addictions, like housing and homelessness. We have said it at the region over and over again. Unfortunately, the other levels in government, especially the provincial government, likes to kick the ball back at us and say, it's the region's fault. It's the region's fault. The city, the region, they're not doing anything on this matter. We've given them millions of dollars. They're not investing in housing. To the delegates, what is your response to that? In working with the region, or working with the municipalities, with the 10% of revenue we collect through property taxes, when the provincial and federal government, particularly the provincial, because you're talking about the provincial government today, what do you say when they kick the ball back at the social service agencies and the lower tier municipalities and say, actually, you guys aren't investing your money properly? We've given you breadcrumbs. Now go invest in the services, and that's all the funding you get. What is your response?
I think one of the things we'd have to say is that it's important for them to do the math and to look at the real numbers. There are enormous challenges in a lot of jurisdictions around homeless encampments, around homelessness, around affordable housing. But Peel is distinct. We haven't given you the disaggregated numbers from this study, but when you look at mental health services, Peel gets less than half what the average jurisdiction gets. When you look at affordable housing, Peel is about half the size of the city of Toronto. It has less than a fifth of the affordable housing. It is no wonder there are encampments when the resources available from the province of Ontario to address these issues are a fraction of what they are in other major urban jurisdictions.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, because I think we need to hammer this point over and over again, because it's important for people to understand in terms of the advocacy that we're doing at the region, but also the advocacy that residents are doing. As you referenced in the previous delegation, during election time, that's when folks start to pay attention to things. So I had a meeting with the chair a couple of weeks back, and Chair Nando, you shared with me something very important. And if you could clarify, like if the region of Peel spent all of our budget on housing and homelessness, would we even have enough money to solve the problem?
And I know that number because if we took everything we collect to solve homelessness for the people in our waiting list, we'd have to take every penny we have for the next 12 years and put it only on that fund. And by the way, I stopped talking because we don't work anymore. We don't have staff. But you don't have the police service. You don't have roads. If we took every penny we had and tried to fix the homelessness problem for refugees, it would take. And remember, after 12 years, you have another 12-year waiting list because 12 more years. I'm glad you remembered it, Councillor. It's stark because we only get a few percent. Remember, we get 10%, but the region gets a fraction of that because there's local government as well. We don't get the 90%. Councillor Santos, thank you so much for it. But to answer the question, if we took every penny we had from all tax dollars at the region of Peel and only tried to solve the homelessness problem, it would take 12 years of my entire budget every year just to solve that. and then I'd be 12 years behind anyway, 12 years later. Councillor Santos, thank you for asking. Back to you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, may I say something to that to add to?
Please, and Councillor Santos still has the floor. Yes, please.
One of the things we are going to be doing, because Councillor Santos asked what we can do, we will join with the region, with the Lothair municipalities. We have a plan that we are going to be rolling this out. We are going to be putting this in front of community throughout the rest of the year, leading into next year budget, leading into elections, because we want the residents of Peel to understand exactly what is happening. Because a lot of people don't understand who pays for what in the first place, right?
Well said.
So we are going to be doing this work. We're going to take an issue and we're going to focus on that and then go to another issue so people can get a deep understanding of what the issues are and where the shortfalls are and how it's impacting them individually. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Santos, anything further?
Yeah, just a quick question to the delegates as well. Have you ever received any correspondence or any letter from the local MPPs acknowledging the concerns that you have regarding being chronically underfunded relative to other municipalities? Has there been any awareness from the local MPPs? Like I'm concerned that perhaps some of them don't even understand the funding structure and how it works either, in terms of municipalities getting such a small sliver of the pie in terms of revenue. Have you received any letter from local MPPs?
Not letter, but we have been in connection with some MPPs, and we are actually setting up meetings with them to discuss this in more detail. So, but they know our concerns. We have been in contact with them over time, and we do tell them. Sometimes we meet on another matter, but we do tell them about the situation. But there's not been a formal letter as such, as far as I know.
If I could add, in our discussions, preliminary discussions with MPPs, the large question is, what's the number? What's the value? And I think with this information now, we just don't want this report to just sit on the shelf and stay there. This report is meant to be translated. It's meant to be sent out into the community across different levels so that we can adequately share when we're having our meetings that this is the value and this is the report in front of you today.
Thank you. And I'm happy, Mr. Chair, to refer this delegation, if possible, back to you to write a letter to share some of these facts and figures as part of our advocacy. I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if that's just direction or if I need a formal motion to refer this back to staff as part of our government relations advocacy and a letter to support. This data is very important. So I just want to make sure that we capture it appropriately and send it to the local MPPs.
I would be happy to do so, but I'd like to, and this is one of the thoughts I had, I'll carry on with the list. This is so well done that, and I know that this shouldn't die here. We should be having a press conference on this. We should, as a group, be extolling this, because they tend to listen more to you than they are political masters that be than us. So yes, but not me. I'm happy to help. Yes, us as a group, where I put you front and center, we put you front and center, and you tell them what we've been trying to tell them, because I think they'll listen to you before. Hasn't worked that great for us in the time that we've been around. It's just gotten worse. So agreed, but my mind was processing, this doesn't stop here. What do we do next? But maybe through our comms, our CAO may have a thought. Councillor Santos, thank you, because I think you're on the right track. We need to it's not over here. We need to shine a light on this and keep pounding this home like the last delegation for the next few critical months as it becomes election season.
Yes,
so Councillor Santos, thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I've heard that they're planning to have maybe a press conference tomorrow.
Today, right?
It started 5 minutes ago.
Okay,
Yeah, it started 5 minutes ago.
So I think that it's important to point out these facts, because again, I think perhaps what they're trying to do is to say that, well, the region has done nothing, the city has done nothing, and residents need to be educated and made very clear that the purse strings are actually with the province, and Peel region has been chronically underfunded to a point where we're dealing with some significant crises in our community. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.